think we can start today's presentation. We are doing wastewater operator certifications training, and this is session 2. And just to confirm, Jason and Tina, you guys can hear me, correct?
Correct.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, we'll introduce a few key people for today. Just for the voices that you'll hear in the background. I've already mentioned them. Tina and Jason will be helping kind of watch the chat, your questions, kind of all that good stuff. It's also important to know Rona, project manager. She may or may not be involved today, but those are important people for you guys to know. And for those of you guys that did not attend yesterday's session, my name is Daniel Cardenas. I'm a senior operations technician. Been in the industry for about almost 19 years now. Half of my time was dedicated to collections operations. CWA, California Collections Operator Level 4. Also have some experience in the treatment and distribution side. California Water Treatment Level 3 and a California Water Treatment Level 4. California Water Distribution Level 3. So I don't know why that gets me all tied up. Currently out here working in Texas, Houston, Texas, for a big 320 MGD water treatment plant expansion. So, and before we begin, I'll show this slide again, like we did yesterday, for your feedback. So any feedback, you guys can scan this QR code and give us the feedback there. Let us know how we did, any good things, bad things. All feedback is actually good feedback. So I appreciate that. So let's start off with the content. Let's talk about evaluating your sewer collection system. So we're going to get into this concept of CMOM. CMOM is a very kind of a important concept when it comes to your collection systems management. So let's start defining that first. CMOM, or a capacity management operation and maintenance program, ensures that adequate capacity and proper management of the operation and maintenance of the collection systems to prevent SSOs. So what a CMOM is doing is it's helping you just prevent these issues. It's a management approach to prevent any issues in your sewer collection system, right? CMOMs usually kind of use a lot of the accepted industry practices for managing your system. Right? This includes the transmission and treatment systems. They all comprise of a CMOM program. So, right. So the collection systems and operations maintenance program includes investigations of capacity constrained areas and ensuring adequate capacity, right? So the CMOM program is kind of what we do, why we do a lot of what we do. So a lot of the texts kind of talk about CMOM programs, and I realize the difference between your textbook knowledge and your field knowledge. A lot of folks aren't out there talking about your CMOM programs, but it is kind of a text knowledge that you should know. There's reasons why we develop the type of programs that we develop. So CMOMs include preventative and proactive maintenance practices.
Hey, just real quickly, someone was saying they're having audio issues. Is anyone else having audio issues? Just wanted to see if it's a system-wide thing or not. I can hear you just fine, by the way. Okay. It seems like audio is fine here with everyone else. All right, sorry. Just maybe David, log off and log back in. To see if that helps. But yeah, sorry. Keep on going.
Okay.
Thanks.
No worries. So a little bit more about collections management. All right. Collections management includes both preventative and proactive maintenance. Preventative maintenance is a regularly scheduled servicing of machinery or other equipment. It prolongs the useful time of of your equipment, and proactive maintenance is maintenance activities that help protect your collection system, right? So CMOM program wants to look at both the maintenance that you're doing to maintain your equipment that you're using for your maintenance activities out in the collection system, right? So both things matter, right? It's not just about getting the tools to maintain your collection system, it's also about maintaining the tools that you're using in your collection system, right? All of it matters and all of it works in unison. So a good CMOM program is an alternative to reactive maintenance. And reactive maintenance would be maintenance that's happening after a failure and event, right? CMOMs give you the ability to appropriately staff, look at costs, look at the environment, or look at the environmental effects before they happen, right? You can plan all this stuff beforehand with a CMOM approach. So we've been talking about SSOs, and I realized we didn't really properly define them yesterday. So what is an SSO? You're seeing a good picture of an SSO now. An SSO is defined as a sanitary sewer overflow, and this is kind of a common question in your grade 1, grade 2 levels, and you may get a review question that'll throw that for those of you that are taking certification exams. But this is a great review, right? So a sanitary system, sewer overflow is an overflow or spill release, discharge, or diversion of untreated or partially treated water from a wastewater or sanitary sewer system. So SSOs are illegal discharges that violate a utility's National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit, or NPDES permit. So we're going to define that in a little bit here. So I realized the sound hadn't been working, but I still want you guys to kind of see this video because SSOs are a big deal, right? So when you have a sewer system, a sanitary sewer overflow, it usually makes the news. It usually makes a big deal, right? It's not things that communities want to hear about. Sewage spilled into their waterways. It's never a pretty sight. It's never a good look for your agency. And if it's a significant SSO, it matters, right? The environmental impacts and just the day-to-day impacts. These may have been walkways that folks can't fish in or walk in. That's kind of a lot of what the video is talking about there. So I also want to talk about a little bit more about, yesterday we talked about a little bit about the combined sewer systems, and combined sewer systems are systems that most agencies are actually trying to eliminate. But here's a good kind of a picture of them. Combined sewer systems are systems that have a combined sewer, and their sewer overflows into an open. It's combined with their storm drain system. So the problem with combined sewer systems is that you could also have there's also potential for CSOs, right? The CSO is very similar to an SSO, combined sewer overflow. It's wastewater that flows out of a combined collection system or lift station as a result of flows exceeding the hydraulic capacity of the system or stoppages in the pipe. CSOs exceeding the hydraulic capacity usually occur during periods of heavy precipitation, or high levels of runoff from snowmelt or other runoff sources also contribute. So usually you'll see CSOs happen when you have heavy rain, right? Your storm drain system gets overloaded, and you start kind of combining that sewage and storm drain. Now you have partially used or maybe a diluted wastewater source that starts overflowing into open waterways like rivers and creeks and such. So let's get back to defining what the NPDES permit was, right? The National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit, or the NPDES permit, is a regulatory document that limits discharges into U.S. waterways and provides monitoring, reporting requirements and other provisions to ensure that discharges, like overflows, do not hurt water quality or people's health. Having an NDPS permit is a requirement of the Clean Water Act. Now, important for the state of Arizona, on December 5th, 2002, Arizona became one of 45 states with authorization from the EPA to operate the NPDES permit, and on the state level under the AZPDES permit, or AZPDES. So the Arizona Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit program. Sorry. So one of the things that you want to evaluate, right, is your system performance. So when you're looking at all these CMOM programs and you're, trying to keep these permits up to date, or trying to make sure that you're staying within the regulations, right, you really want to evaluate how well your performance is, your system is performing, right? So you want to analyze your overall system performance. So a good measure of telling how well your sewer collection system is maintained is by tracking how many SSOs or CSOs your system is experiencing. Typically, you want to kind of look at these kind of as stoppages per 100 miles of pipe, or SSOs per 100 miles of pipe. You want to track how many complaints or service requests you're getting per 100,000 folks in the population, or you want to track things like how quickly you respond to these service requests. Another part of your system, a very important part of your system performance, includes your infrastructure. So you want to evaluate how well your infrastructure is, how well your lift stations are performing, the overall integrity, of course, your pipeline performance, and potential degradation. You see kind of if your pipes look like the one on the left, and it's a clay pipe that's kind of pretty badly damaged, right? You want to know that, you want to evaluate that. Now, in this case scenario, that pipe is still doing its job, and you may still have some exfiltration going on there. But an agency needs to be aware of the performance and be able to budget or start planning out when that pipeline is going to get repaired or replaced. So all this evaluating performance, you have to still keep in mind your performance standards, right? So there's certain standard performance measurements. These include the proper management, operation, and maintenance of all the assets that the utility controls. And ensuring adequate capacity for the base and peak system flows, stopping and preventing SSOs, notifying the parties with potential exposure, a written summary of your CMOM program. You need to look at your CMOM program and audit this occasionally. Make it available to the public, right? These are your typical performance standards. You want to look at these things and say, are these things up to date? Are you fulfilling these obligations to the public, your agency, the company that you work for? Now let's look at evaluating performance. Now, those of you that attended yesterday, there was somebody that I was asking more about the computer management, maintenance management systems, or CMMS systems, and I wanted to rethrow this slide in for just overall information, right? So this is a good tool for maintenance and troubleshooting, and it helps you evaluate your system. So it was worth talking about all over again, right? A computer management maintenance system is a computerized software program that notifies operators when maintenance activities should be performed by generating work orders, right? So really, there's a lot of great programs out there, a lot of great companies that we can talk about that kind of help you manage your system. Now, I realize every utility doesn't have the capability or the budget to even implement this quite yet, but it is something kind of like the new wave of kind of helping manage your CMOM programs or collection systems. I mean, it helps you keep track of how much runtime is on parts, when parts should be repaired, whether you have enough spare parts on in stock, or how quickly you can get them. A lot of these programs can help you track, or help you link everything to your operations and maintenance manuals. They can integrate to your SCADA system. There's great companies out there. I worked with 2 different ones in the past, both a little different, right? Q's has some good software. I mean, I know there's companies out there that'll integrate with your line cleaning and CCTV inspection software as well. It's just an overall awareness. It's a great tool to help you maintain your permits and make sure that you are doing the proper maintenance in your collection system. All right, so let's get a quick review in here. What is wastewater that flows out of a sanitary sewer or lift station due to flows exceeding the hydraulic capacity of the sewer, stoppages in the sewer, or a discharge of wastewater from a location that is not authorized by an NPDES permit? So the A is CSO, B a SSO, C INI, or D SSES.
So answers are strolling in now. Looks like we got mixtures of, well, pretty much all B's, what everyone's saying at this point.
Yeah. All right. And you guys would be correct. SSOs, right? Now, keep in mind, SSOs aren't just a manhole. I love this cartoon too, by the way. So sometimes you'll have sanitary sewer overflows, inside of community members or somebody in the public's house, right? So another question: what comprises the accredited industry practices for properly managing, operating, and maintaining sanitary wastewater collection, transmission, and treatment systems? Is it A, a capacity management, operation, and maintenance program, B, a preventative maintenance program, C, an asset management program, or D, your national pollutant discharge elimination system?
Answers are slowly rolling in at this point. And it looks like we got mostly consensus with A at this point, a few that vary, but mostly A is what we're seeing.
All right, and yep, I mean, you guys,
we did have one D.
yeah, actually, I believe this is an error here, so that should have been A. I apologize. I think I accidentally adjusted my slides here and got rid of the right question. So that the answer for that was A. So, all right, we're going to get into a little bit of safety, or quite a bit of safety. Now, when you're taking working out in the collection system, or when you're taking a collections systems operations exam, you guys will realize that a lot of the safety practices are kind of a major part of these exams, especially when you're in the levels 1 and 2. You'll still get a little bit of safety in level 3 or 4 exam, but it's important to review your safety protocols. Now, because of the amount of content that all these exams cover, we won't be able to cover absolutely everything. But I do recommend that, that's one of the things, and I'll talk a little bit about it. That's one of the things that I really love about the way the industry exams work, right? Although incredibly broad, I think the exams are catered to folks that have been in the industry for a while. Now, level 1 and 2, you should probably look at a lot of those training classes that your agencies are sending you to, or if you're not involved in an agency yet, I mean, I would recommend looking at these safety practices, because I do feel that when I was kind of leveling my certifications up a bit, a lot of the stuff that I learned in my safety trainings was kind of all applicable to, or actually all of my certification exams. So safety matters, right? Couple of things to know about safety, right? Safety is all kind of dictated by, well, typically industry-wide is dictated by OSHA, your Occupational Safety and Health Administration. There's OSHA's logo, right? If you don't know anything about OSHA, OSHA was created in 1970. It helps assure safe and healthful working conditions. It helps enforce safety standards, and it provides training, outreach, and education assistance. Now in Arizona, you guys actually have a level up, right? Occasionally you'll run into states that get a little bit stricter, right? Or they have their own regulatory rules and regulations. Arizona has the Arizona Division of Occupational Safety and Health. Very important to know. These guys come knocking at your door. Not fun. I've had that experience, unfortunately, with a chemical spill or somebody getting hurt with in one of our treatment facilities, and it was not dealing with the safety or with the OSHA personnel, especially when there's an injury. Is just, I felt I was like I was being interrogated, even though I wasn't there the day of the event. So it's not the funnest thing to deal with. So a little bit more about safety. Each employer must provide written safety policies and procedures, right? You want to provide safety training. We talked about that a little bit, and your employer is really required to provide this for you, and they want to give you training. You want to get the training for work-related equipment. You want to have those weekly tailgates that a lot of us, and I can say this as an operator, and I can say this as a former manager, that these weekly tailgates and monthly staff meetings, sometimes they get ignored. As an operator, sometimes you want to get out and do what you need to do. As a manager, sometimes just you get sidetracked with everything else, and you realize that your team wants to get out there. It's important to have those weekly tailgates. It's important to have those monthly staff meetings. It's important that managers and supervisors support these things. I do feel that some of these weekly tailgates and staff meetings, that especially the tailgates are better led by leads and the field team itself. But a manager and supervisor should still be there to support and encourage everything that's being shared. Also, documenting these events is really important, right? You want to document your accidents. You want to document your near misses, right? And why do you want to do that, right? Why is a near miss important to document? Well, because you learn from those mistakes, right? You want to report those near misses, right? Because if you don't, right, you see this guy here on the screen, right? You can have a scenario in which that near miss becomes a real event. So documentation is absolutely important. And of course, review all this documentation through safety committee reviews. I know a lot of those safety committees get ignored. They matter. Your involvement matters. So keep that all in mind. Elements of a safety program, a safety policy statement, right? What a safety policy statement does is it identifies the goals and objectives of your safety program. It identifies the responsible parties and their roles. It affirms the intent of management, and it describes disciplinary action, right? You want to be able to have these things kind of written out. You don't need these things, and you're required to have these things written out. Safety issues aren't something that should be left up to interpretation. I mean, there's strict rules and regulations for a reason. We really want everybody to go home safely. And components of a safety program will define the types of PPE that you're wearing, right? PPE or personal protective equipment. Keep in mind, operators, safety equipment shall be worn according to the work being performed, right? So depending on what work you're doing, and your agency may require to wear all this PPE at all times. I know the site that I'm at now, it doesn't matter where I'm at, you're required to have gloves, safety glasses, a hard hat, proper boots, all those things matter. So I mean, things to keep in mind too, that you may not always be wearing, right? Coveralls, rain suits, all those things, you should have those readily available. Depending on where you are in the state, things can change fairly quickly sometimes. More components of a safety program include a definition of management's responsibility, right? Management's responsibility, is to formulate, maintain, review, update the written policies. Management still wants to provide a safe workspace, and a manager's responsibility is to delegate the authority to ensure that all these safety elements are being implemented. Now, you as an employer, an employee have the right to know certain things, right? So, and there is a requirement to maintain this worker right to know. So the worker right to know should identify the hazards, label them appropriately, because the workers have the right to know the potential hazards of their work site, they need to be trained on hazard communications programs. So on that, we're going to go through and talk about a couple of safety abbreviations, a couple of items that you guys should know, or meanings that you should know. So here's the first one. You may see something like IDLH. IDLH means it's immediately dangerous to your life or health, right? So this means that the exposure to these contaminants are likely to cause death or immediate or delayed permanent adverse health effects. You want to prevent or something that's IDLH may prevent escape from such an environment, right? So this is something you definitely want to avoid. You don't, anything that's IDLH, you stay away from. Or another abbreviation that you want to be aware of is LEL. LEL, of course, would be your lower explosive limit. So this is the lowest concentration by percentage of a gas or vapor that air is capable of producing a flash of fire in the presence of an ignition source, right? So you know, usually a lot of your gas detectors, a lot of your chemicals will kind of give you the lower explosive limit of that particular chemical. A lot of your gas detectors are reading the lower explosive limit in your atmosphere. So a couple more abbreviations. The permissible exposure limit. So this is the PEL, a legal limit that in the United States for exposure of an employee to chemical substances or physical agents such as noise, right? So, and then the upper explosive limit, the highest concentration of gas or vapor that can produce a flash or fire. Now, I want you guys to keep in mind there's a permissible exposure limits. That doesn't mean that you want to be completely comfortable there. There's still an awareness that has to be there. So you have to be completely prepared for all the circumstances, especially in the collection systems. There's a lot of areas that we may be in with entrapped gases that could really make an impact. You know, so keep that in mind. We'll talk a little bit more about those too coming up next. A lot of atmospheric hazards that you have to deal with, a lot of air quality issues. And how do you deal with these air quality issues? Well, I mean, especially if you're getting in a confined space or certain areas, you want to be really comfortable with your gas detector, right? You want to know what a normal atmosphere looks like, right? So realize if you're outside of your a normal or good atmosphere. So keep in mind your normal oxygen levels should be at 21% or 29% to be exact. But most people, for exam purposes, they may use 20.9% or 21%. So keep that in mind. So a good oxygen level has to be between 19.5 and 23.5%. Anything below 19.5 is considered oxygen deficient. Anything above 23.5 is rich in oxygen, and that can also be dangerous, of course, because now that can also encourage different issues. Your lower explosive level needs to be less than 10%. Hydrogen sulfide gas needs to be less than 10 parts per million, and your carbon monoxide needs to be less than 25 parts per million. Now, safety still needs to be worried about other atmospheric hazards, right? You also should be aware of fall hazards, right? You need a ladder or harness if you're deeper than 5 feet. Noise hazards, temperature hazards, lighting hazards, and these are just a few of the examples that I can think of. There's plenty of other hazards out there that you totally need to be aware of in order to maintain a safe working environment. Now, coming up next, I kind of want to talk a little bit more about some of these air quality issues, specifically because collection system operators, I've seen some manholes and some lift stations where these things kind of happen often, where your environmental hazards tend to change fairly quickly, right? I think we mentioned yesterday a little bit that the environment of a collection system, especially inside a sewer manhole or a wet well. I mean, it changes drastically. So you want to be aware of the potential hazards that you're dealing with day by day. So if you're in an oxygen efficient atmosphere, right, at 19.5%, I mean, that's considered the minimum acceptable oxygen level. And you can kind of read along here with me. You know, when you're at 15 and 19%, you starting to have a little bit of an impaired coordination. At 10 to 12%, your lips start turning blue. You start breathing a little faster. At 8 to 10%, now you're starting to feel a little you know, nauseous, unconscious. You're not thinking right. At 6 to 8%, I mean, we can start talking about, you know, the risk of fatality, right? And 4 to 6% of oxygen, right? You could be in a coma or die within 40 seconds. These are, you know, oxygen deficient atmospheres are pretty serious, so I want you guys to keep in mind. We'll talk a little bit more about, and we're really just going through all the stuff that you'll see on your typical gas detector, right? Hydrogen sulfide, right? Hydrogen sulfide has a rotten egg odor at low concentrations, and some of us in the industry have heard that a lot. I do want you to keep in mind, though, that, you know, at higher concentrations, there possibly will not be any warnings of any hydrogen sulfide in your area. That's why it's important to have your gas detector nearby. Now, kind of added this chart for you guys to be able to see the impacts of hydrogen sulfide and how long it takes for it to make an impact in your life, right? So 10 parts per million is the permissible exposure limit, and you could only be around that for a max of 8 hours. Now, it was common practice for us, and I recommend that you guys really analyze the best practice for you guys, depending on the area that you're in. Usually, if we saw any bit of hydrogen sulfide in our confined space area, we would evacuate, ventilate, take every precautionary action that we can take. Now, and I don't remember if I mentioned it, but even when you smell that rotten egg odor, it doesn't take very long before you start going nose blind to it. So be aware of that, right? You may smell that initial rotten egg odor, and then you go nose blind to it pretty quickly. Your nose gets accustomed to the smell, and you know, you think you're in a totally acceptable working environment until you're not. Right at 50 to 100 parts per million, you start getting a little bit of irritation in your eyes within the hour. The irritation increases as the concentration increases, right? Now at 500 to 700 parts per million, right, it only takes half an hour to an hour to render you unconscious or dead. Now you start getting to your higher concentrations, right? And mind you, you will see no warning of it. You can go unconscious or die within a matter of minutes. So carbon monoxide is another common environmental hazard that we may have to deal with in our collection system. So carbon monoxide is an odorless, colorless gas. And we can talk a little bit about the impacts of carbon monoxide as well. Your permissible exposure limit is 8 hours at 50 parts. At 200 parts, you start getting a headache in a matter of 3 hours. And the higher the concentrations go, the higher that gets. The lower time you have, and the more uncomfort you start dealing with. At 1,000 to 2,000 parts, you start getting dizzy, you start having heart palpitations in a matter of 30 minutes, and you can be unconscious in a matter of 30 minutes at that higher concentrations. Now, why is this such a big deal, especially in collections departments? Well, because a lot of lift stations are kind of, and a lot of the stations may be nearby a street, may be nearby heavy traffic. Definitely a lot of manholes are, right? And one of the biggest contributors to carbon monoxide is cars' exhaust, right? So a lot of these gases get entrapped in these confined spaces, manholes, lift stations, etc. And now that I defined all the hazards, we'll talk a little bit more about confined spaces and confined space safety. Confined spaces are defined as spaces large enough that an employee can enter. It has a limited or restricted means of access, and it is not designed for continuous employee occupancy. Now, typically, you're going to define spaces in two different ways. You're going to define them in a permit required confined space, which has a potential to contain a hazardous atmosphere, potential to, for engulfment. Entry can be trapped, asphyxiated, or otherwise hurt by inwardly covering walls or floors floor slopes or tapers. And and anything that has any other safety or health hazard is considered a permit required confined space. Now, there is such thing as a non-permit required confined space, and this is a space that does not contain any of the potential hazards that we talked about. Now, nonetheless, whether your agency requires a permit or has deemed a certain space non-permitted, confined space is still confined space, meaning that you should still have your gas detectors, you should still have your proper retrieval systems. We're talking a matter of safety, and shortly I'll kind of share a story with you guys regarding the issues or the hazards of confined space. The hazards of confined spaces. Now, we can talk about a little bit about confined space entry teams. Your typical confined space entry team is kind of is defined. Well, the main components of a confined space entry team include an entrant, which is the person that's permitted to enter, an attendant. This is the person that stands outside and must remain until relieved by another attendant. So this means this is the guy that monitors and communicates with the person that's inside the entrant. This person is not getting tools, right? He's not walking back and forth from the truck, getting tools and lowering them. A lot of folks get really comfortable with that, and this person is definitely not entering the space. You also have supervisors. Supervisor is the person, not necessarily a supervisor by title, but a supervisor in the confined space entry team. This is a person that authorizes the entry, that is accountable, right? That confirms and cancels the permit. Any trained personnel can be considered a supervisor in a confined space as long as they are defined in that role. And another portion of your confined space team that you may want to acknowledge is your confined space rescue team. Rescue team matters. It is you need to be ready to get out of that space in a short moment's notice. And if you can't, you want to be able to. It's always nice to have a rescue team available to you. Now, a lot of folks like to use the fire department as your rescue team. I mean, and if that's the only means, communicating and letting folks know where you're at and what you guys do is probably an important part of your confined space entry program. So we have a short video of confined space hazards. Sorry, I don't know why I did that. And I'll try to talk to you guys about it. But the most important part of a confined space, or the most important thing to realize in a confined space, is if an emergency happens, you can't be the person you can't be an additional victim. And I think before I started the video, it showed the stat there that most of your victims end up being would-be rescuers. So it's important to keep that in mind. I'm gonna skip through some of these. So confined space, like we talked about, are very dangerous because of the accumulation of gases or potential hazards in there. And it's kind of difficult, especially, I mean, I've definitely worked in a multitude of confined spaces, been down 60-foot deep wet wells, and have definitely felt the pains of this. I will tell you the scariest or oddest moment in my career was fixing a bubbler tube inside a confined space, inside a wet well. And the weirdest feeling in the world is not knowing what happened. So, because I decided to spend a little bit more time on confined space safety for a reason, right? So, I guess I'm fortunate to not remember everything that happened, but I do realize that I went from from fixing a bubbler tube inside a wet well, completely suspended inside a confined space, to waking up maybe 15 minutes later at the top. Fortunately, I had a great team that recognized that something was happening, and I don't know whether it was an oxygen deficient atmosphere, or you're just overall dehydration, or but I passed out in the confined space and woke up with a team trying to make sure I was okay, or regain my consciousness. It's definitely a scary moment in my career. Definitely an eye opener after I think 6 years of doing the same type of work. Had to deal with that scary moment, right? Fortunately, we had the proper teams there to get me out of there, and here I am talking to you guys today, letting you guys know, hey, it's important to have those things in place, right? If proper team wasn't there, if the proper recognition, if folks weren't paying attention, could have passed out, could have not been taken out in time. Kids would have not had their father, and things would have been not as great as they are today. All right. So that finishes up our safety portion of this presentation. Now we're going to kind of get into routine operations. I wanted to kind of show you guys, for those of you guys that are not quite in the industry, or just trying to work your way in, or not as familiar with everything in our industry yet, or what a collections system operator does, wanted to talk about routine operations. Now,
by the way, Daniel, I just want to say thanks for sharing that story. That was a good, powerful story. So just wanted to provide you that feedback.
Thank you. So a lot of what our routine operations does, it kind of includes, we'll get into a little bit of the day-by-days, but one of the most important things in routine operations is knowing what your system is and where you're supposed to be working, right? So there's different types of system maps that I wanted to talk about, and a lot of times you'll have questions on maps and map types, so I wanted to throw this in there. So system maps include information about specific components assisting in the maintenance or repair of a system. So there's different types of maps that you're going to see throughout your system. There's area maps, which show the service area, boundaries, trunk lines, pumping stations, treatment plants, etc. There's master maps, which will show you the entire system. Usually these are huge, either huge maps or multiple maps, depending on the size. And then there's section maps that are specific to an area that are of a master map that may be easier to read, right? So these are kind of going to be the reason that mapping is important to your routine operations, because especially when you're out there cleaning service lines, you're going to want to see what area you're working on. Now, there's great experienced operators that have worked certain sections so long that I remember grades and distances and manhole numbers and ID and line IDs, but most of us, we're not going to get there, right? So getting familiar with your mapping system is an important part of your day-to-day operations. So, of course, there's also base maps that show individual parcels or properties. Now, system maps individually should show location of mains, trunks, interceptors, manholes, cleanouts, boundaries, and system-related buildings. Included in these maps will be things like your directional flows, force mains or gravity mains, different access points or overflow points, pipe type and size, your manhole and line IDs, your grade, right? What grade that sewer line, if it's a gravity line, what grade that sewer line is installed at, section lengths, your depths and elevations, and what scale this map is drawn to. So I wanted to throw this question in because there is not a huge pumping section, but I did want to let every operator know that usually pumps and I didn't include a huge pumping section because of time constraints, of course, but pumps and pumping dynamics are a big part of your collections systems, and especially your collection systems exams. So I'm throwing a couple of pumping questions in there for for the sake of just exposure. So I know we didn't cover this, but which of the following can cause overheating of mechanical equipment? A, undergreasing, B, dried out packing, C, overgreasing, or D, water hammer?
So far, we've got a mixtures. I'll let a few more come in, maybe. Looks like we kind of maybe hit.
Yes.
We got C's and A's mostly, with a couple of B's.
Yeah. So, and this is a great question too, because usually people think undergreasing is a problem, but people forget how bad overgreasing is, and the reason this is the typical answer in an operator exam is because, yeah, undergreasing, of course, for those of you guys that are fairly mechanical, undergreasing, everybody knows the hazard of undergreasing, right? But usually you're definitely going to get heat because of friction, but you're going to get damage based on wear, right? On different wear. I think when it comes to operator exams, we definitely want everybody to start. They definitely want everybody to start thinking about the issues or the dangers of overgreasing as well, because it kind of spins things a little bit faster than it's supposed to, and this generates heat that can be damaging your equipment as well. So it's always important when you're talking about pumps and pump maintenance to kind of look at those operations and maintenance manuals and make sure that you're greasing to the right level. I remember as an operator, you always had that old mechanic that would be like, give everything 2 pumps and that's good enough, right? And the truth of the matter is, just depending on the size of the orifice that you're installing your grease, or that you're pumping your grease in, or the piece of equipment itself, 2 pumps may not be it, or it's important to look at those operations and maintenance manuals to realize, right, what it is, how much grease you're supposed to put in that piece of equipment, because overgreasing is just as bad as undergreasing. So, and you can see kind of a cool little picture of the effects of overgreasing there. Well, let's get back into lift stations and lift station inspections, right? So why do we inspect lift stations? And I remember I gave you guys a little background that I started in the collections department, then I went over to the distribution department and moved up into the water treatment side of things. But back when I was in the collections department, I'd have a lot of arguments with a lot of the distribution operators, or especially the water treatment operators that eventually became me, right? But you'd always get the arguments like, you don't need a collections operator, like lift stations operate automatically, right? Well, we know that's partially true, but not always, right? There's always issues that happen in a lift station that you need to be aware of, right? So one of the things that you need to talk about as an operations team, it's definitely as a management team, is how often you need to be at your lift stations physically inspecting them, right? There's certain lift stations that you're showing up to, and this is part of a routine that an operator would do, that would take part of, right? Inspecting your lift stations fairly frequently. Now, these things could be daily, bi-weekly, weekly, monthly. In the system, we had 13. In the system I used to operate, there was 13 different lift stations in our agency, and I can tell you there was 2 that we did daily. There was a handful that we did bi-weekly. There was a few that we did weekly, and there was maybe 1 or 2 that were offline that we would still check monthly for, just for potential issues that are happening there, even though they aren't running, obviously vandalism and things like that. That's all things that you guys, there is no set rule on how often you need to inspect the lift station, but it should be discussed and determined. The frequency should definitely be determined, because they still need to be inspected, because there's things that you may not be able to see remotely. So now here's a few items to consider when you're determining how often you're going to check, right? Now, if this is a bigger lift station with higher flow rates, you may want to be there daily. This is a high priority lift station. Now, if it's a lower flow rate lift station, you probably take your time and maybe not be there, right? Lift station failure may not necessarily back up, right? It's also going to matter a lot whether you have automated controls. How much can you see on SCADA? Do you have an HMI controller remotely that you can kind of adjust things there? Right? If you don't have those automated controls, you may want to be there a little bit more often. Of course, your location is going to be a major factor on how often you inspect your lift station, right? There's always a potential for vandalism, other environmental hazards, traffic. And then, of course, the lift station's current status. Like I said, there was some lift stations that we checked monthly only because they were offline. So we really wanted to just check out those things like vandalism or other potential environmental factors. You know, if this is a lift station that its overall condition or historical performance hasn't been really great at recently, or has been great, that's going to make a difference in how often you want to be there. If you know there's a current mechanical issue and you don't have the redundancy, then you know this may go from a weekly or bi-weekly check to, hey, we want somebody to drive by daily and just kind of see how that one pump or these pumps are running till we get our redundant pumps there. You know, if there's certain work happening in the area of that lift station, you know, there's a grading project or there's a lift station rehab or rebuild, you know, the frequency of your lift station inspections is gonna change and be a little bit more frequent now.
There was a comment from a David who was saying that apparently the frequency is also somewhat driven by ADEQ rule determination, particular AAC code. I think that drives as well too. I'm not familiar with the one, I'll be honest, but that was one of the things he was saying. So.
Oh, that's cool. And yeah, and I apologize. I do work for different states at different times, so that's one of the I'm going to write down and look up myself. So I do appreciate that one.
Yeah, I'll send it over to you just so you can have it's like R185-104 of the AAC code. So thank you, David.
Thank you. Typical items that you're going to inspect when you show up for a lift station inspection, right? You're going to trip breakers, indicating lights on the equipment that's operating, your flow data, elapsed time meters, readings, right? Vandalism, general cleanliness. A lot of lift stations, depending on the agency, are going to have different round sheets that they want you to fill out. You know, a lot of these will include flow meter readings or, you know, elapsed time meter readings to see how well a pump is performing. Flow data is incredibly important to review in your lift station checks, right? And of course, although depending on your SCADA systems, you should be able to see some issues remotely. You know, there's certain things that an operator knows when they're there, right? How pumps run and how they sound. It makes a huge difference. Physically being on site as opposed to just remotely checking everything. Keep in mind, lift stations are wet wells are still confined space, so do not enter confined space during routine inspections. Especially what it's very common. I've seen a lot of folks try to enter, especially lift stations that have the wet well dry well combinations, right? People feel a lot more comfortable walking into a dry well. Well, it's still considered a confined space, and depending on, you know, the setup or the way it was built, right? You know, you need to follow the proper safety protocols. You know, notify the appropriate personnel, make sure other folks are present, right? You definitely don't want any confined space hazards at a lift station to affect your life. So. Another quick question. Limitation of using packing on pump includes A, increased shaft vibration, B, increased wear on the shaft or shaft sleeve, C, longer run times, or D, increased temperatures.
Answers are rolling in right now. Wait for a few more to come in. Looks like we got a mixture, largely B, but a good number of D's as well too.
And those of you that said that B, yeah, it's the biggest limitation of packing on a pump, right?
Someone's not sure what pack was, so I don't know if you want to clarify what packing is.
So pump packing it's a type of pump. So it's used in a seal. So there's two types of seals that a pump typically uses. I should have included a slide on that. Well, actually, I did. So mechanical seals and pump packing, right? So pump packing kind of it's a way to provide a lubricant, or not lubricant. It keeps your pump seal cool, right? So there's usually some type of lubricant, usually by seal water, that's kind of being pushed into that seal, that keeps things running cool or smoothly. Now, there's a packing included in there that needs to be, that does have, it's a wearable piece that needs to get replaced every so often, right? So. All right, another quick question. Entrained air frequently contributes to A, cavitation, B, lower electrical costs, C, reduced wet well capacity, or D, less odors at the lift station.
Answers are rolling in right now. Be a few more. Looks like largely A's of what we're seeing, a couple C's as well. So A's seems to be the prevailing winner so far.
And A would be the right answer. So kind of through this, I found this cool little GIF, right, that'll show you how it works, or how the cavitation works when you have air in. So.
But cavitation also does result of the fact that you get a negative pressure on the water as well too, besides just air entrainment. There's other causes for it too. But nonetheless, keep on going. Sorry.
You're fine. I appreciate that. That's actually very important to know. So lift station inspections. Every lift station should have a physical or digital log sheet for every on-site visit, right? So there's an example of a good one that I found, or a decent one I found. Usually, depending on the lift station size, type, you may want a little bit more information, a little less information. Nonetheless, you should always document, right, when you've been there. A lot of lift stations either physically or digitally have a log sheet that just tell you, hey, when you visited, what you did there, and why you did that there, right? So, all right. Next video kind of shows us what a sewer line cleaning crew does daily, and I really wish you could hear this one. This one's out here in McAllen, but the city did a really good job of just kind of demonstrating what these guys are doing day by day, during their line cleaning operations. Of course, all these guys that get comfortable kind of being out there, right? So part of their big spill was to kind of demonstrate how big just their stretching operations are, just getting ready for work, right? You definitely had a couple of experienced operators in their Vector truck or their combination unit, and trying to get everything ready for cleaning. They had a good breakdown on just cleaning and vacuuming operations. All right, these are some of the things that some of you guys are going to be would be doing day by day based on your tasks for the day. So if you were on the line cleaning crew, right, things that you should be aware of. I did notice that they don't really wear any face coverings in McAllen, but not every agency does, and some folks get comfortable. I wasn't particularly a big fan of that mist that came up and kind of covered, right? But I covered your face, but I knew some folks that almost wore it like a badge of honor, right? So of course they kind of broke down the on-call personnel and just the responses that you have to do. So for those of you that have not been on a line cleaning crew or haven't seen what this looks like, this is kind of your typical breakdown of how it all looks, right? So these are often underappreciated, hardworking guys that are just kind of moving along and doing their thing to provide for their community. So another quick question. So if a line cleaning crew cleans 4,700 feet a day, how long will it take to clean 320 miles of sewer line? And I'll give everybody a few moments to answer that one. The options are A, 360 days, B, 1.5 years. C, 16 months. And D, 287 days.
Still waiting for answers to roll in. Got one in so far. I'm gonna wait for a few more roll in before I start giving, because I don't think everyone can see everyone else's answers. So let's see. Looks like we got kind of a mixture of answers this time, so it might be good to walk through this one. So we've got answers from D to 360 to A to B.
The correct answer was 360 days. Now, how you do that was right. You have to realize you have to convert all your units of measurement the same, right? So you have to know, and a lot of your operator cheat sheets will let you know that there's 5,280 feet in a mile, right? So then you plug in the math, right? 320 miles at 5,280 feet. That's how many feet you need to clean a sewer system. You take that math and divide it by your feet a day, and it's 359.49 days or 360 days. So also a very typical math question that you're going to see on a collections exam. So keep that in mind. We talked a little bit about traffic control yesterday. I wanted to get a little further into it today for those of you guys that weren't in attendance yesterday, right? So I gave you guys my rant on how, especially for certification exams, not very defined on how many components they want to say there is. And for those of us that have taken multiple trainings, like I said, the Ken Curry books and some of the books out here, I think even the Arizona Department of Traffic kind of defines the 5 main components, and I'm going to stick with the 5 main components. If you guys get that answer wrong on an exam at some point in time, you guys can send me a nasty email. That's fine. I'd rather you guys be safe and include your buffer area, and then kind of just break down the 4 main components that are sometimes just included in some of your text. But of course, the 5 main components of a traffic control are just are typically your advanced warning area, which your advanced warning area is where your high signs are at, right? Where you're going to alert drivers of the upcoming work. And depending on, we'll talk a little bit more about the specific regulations, but the amount of high signs, types of high signs are all going to be defined properly, right? So they're all going to be set at a certain distance apart and a certain distance away from your work zone. The next main component of a traffic control is your transition area, right? This is the area that guides drivers where you want them to go. This is where you typically have your taper, right? Your cones kind of guiding everybody in the lane or direction that you want them to be in. Your third main component is the buffer area. This is the controversial area that's not always included in text, right? But every great traffic control training has this buffer area, which is it's just an empty area that creates a physical barrier between the work area and the moving traffic. And I realize, especially since a lot of those folks doing the sewer line cleaning or CCTV inspections are in like very fast moving traffic control operations. Sometimes folks get really comfortable with the buffer area, especially based on the size, the amount of space that you guys have out in traffic. So give yourself as much buffer as you possibly can give yourself, right? The quicker and the more space you have between the delineation and your actual work zone, the safer you're going to be, right? We all know the hazards that you deal with or day by day by just simply standing out there and doing the work that you guys do. And like I said, it sometimes goes unnoticed by agencies and communities, but it's a very important part, right? So take the responsibility to just give yourself enough space to make sure you're working safely. Of course, the fourth main component is the work area. This is where the magic is happening. This is where you're doing what you need to do. And of course, another important area that sometimes gets ignored is the termination area. You got to let the drivers know, hey, you're out of this work zone. You're good. You're good to go. Go ahead and transition into your lane and follow normal traffic rules. Now, traffic control is all going to be dictated by your Arizona Department of Transportation guidelines, right? And you also have a handy little tool that's available in the industry, which is your work area traffic control handbook. Right, this is going to kind of define the different types of reflective apparel, your flagger training, proper size of your stop slow paddles, right? You're going to want that big 24-inch paddle on a 6-foot rigid staff, right? At night, you want to be visible. You want that traffic paddle to be visible. You're also going to define both the Arizona Department of Transportation guidelines and your watch book are going to help you define proper delineation types and sizes, cones, barricades, drums, what's appropriate for the type of traffic control, whether it's temporary or long-term. Then, of course, advanced warning techniques with your high signs, arrow boards. I've always been on the side of, I know one of the last things that we did in the collections department I worked for was making sure that even the big combination units had arrow boards installed in the back, in the rear, and some proper lighting in the front, because the most communication that you can get, the better, right? So you definitely want to keep your crew safe out there. I kind of threw that picture in because I thought it was funny. I was looking for cones, right? But I guess the most important thing is be visible. So
Yeah, I've traveled internationally, and the safety considerations they have are a lot more lax to where I would not feel comfortable. So I'm very glad we have such a protocol.
Yep. Yeah. Definitely state by state and internationally, it makes a difference. And actually in some states, city by city or county by county, the regulations are followed totally differently. I can tell you that I've been a couple of different cities, without mentioning too many different cities, that I'm just definitely questioning what the intent of their traffic control was. So we talked a little bit about bucket machines yesterday. I wanted you guys to see how they kind of worked and operated today. I know these are not always the most common, really common in bigger cities, but not so much in smaller or mid-sized agencies. So your operator exams may talk about a bucket machine. So I wonder if I can turn the closed captioning on here. So maybe you guys could, unavailable. Bucket machine, I mean, it really is not, it's not something that you're going to use typically for emergency operations. It is going to be more maintenance purposes for getting, areas that heavy debris are present, right? So, I mean, and then at least it's kind of giving you some narration of what a bucket machine looks like, right? You kind of throw the bucket down there. You have a cable that it connects to that pulls it through the other side, right? So the biggest trick is getting that cable and connecting them, and you basically you pull that bucket through the area that has heavy grit. It's collecting all that grit, and then it goes and dumps it in either a loader or a dump truck that's sitting on the other side. Kind of a neat process. Like I said, unless you work for a bigger municipality, sometimes it's not very common to see. But wanted you guys to have that exposure, right? It's a cool little demonstration picture there too. So kind of let this one play out a little bit for those of you guys that haven't seen how a bucket machine works. So I had the beautiful experience of working with an agency that initially only had about 300 miles of pipeline, but the agency almost doubled in size, right? Almost adopted a whole different city while I was working there. So our techniques and approaches got a little different, especially when we started getting 21-inch, 42-inch lines. Never had the opportunity of using a bucket machine, so I'm not going to lie to you guys about that. But I realized that our practices and the tools that we needed to clean certain lines started changing over the course of time. Great for overall exposure, though. All right. And am I seeing a question? That's a lot of solid material. I haven't been on the field before. Yeah. So there's definitely some areas that you're going to have some heavy solid material. So Another thing that routine operations may be having to deal with is responses and complaints, right? Let's face it, customer complaints are likely to happen even with great operations teams and procedures, right? So how do you deal with these folks? How do you deal with these angry folks? Well, first and foremost, I want you guys to be aware that you guys have to be mindful, right? No matter where you're at, right? Anytime you're dealing with a customer, whether it's a regular response or a complaint, you represent your agency, your utility, your company, right? And overall, you represent your profitability, right? And how much support you're going to get from the community. So you have to be mindful of that. Now, also be understanding, right? Your response time matters. So how you respond to these responses and how quickly you respond to complaints or calls for backups, it matters, right? Community is not going to be really happy if you're taking too long to get to their particular complaint. No customer is happy when sewer's backing up into their house or in front of their house, or it's never an easy situation. So it absolutely matters how quickly you get there, and the attentiveness of the situation. Obviously, training helps, right? Proper training on how you want to deal with these different complaints, whether it's a backup in a house or whether it's a backup in the street or a collapsed manhole, or I've seen manhole lids that have dropped inside the line, or definitely knowing how to deal with these circumstances makes a huge difference. So be knowledgeable, but be honest, right? If you don't know the answer, right, point to the appropriate personnel to answer the right questions, right? So that's important. It's just a little advice. Your attitude and approach goes a long way. I ended up being the guy that had to deal with a lot of customer service issues. I think it's because sometimes it's no matter what. I mean, I did my best to provide the best service for the customer, right? All within staying within our realm and our responsibility. So, and that's another important part, right? Know your responsibility, right? You have to know what you're responsible for and what you're not responsible for. Right? Some utilities may be responsible for laterals, some aren't, right? You still have to be courteous and try to help out, right? The utility I worked for wasn't responsible for a lateral, but we may provide the service if they had a backup in their house and we knew something, root intrusion on the lateral. We may still push cam their lateral and just try to help out as much as possible, right? Give them advice. There's no offense to any plumbers that are out listening, right? But sometimes plumbers are a little bit different than public agencies, because a lot of plumbers are out for profit, right? So I've definitely seen some folks taken advantage of. So whatever advice I can give to the sweet old lady down the street that better, right? The better service that I was able to provide for our agency. So just know your responsibilities, right? Even if it's not something that you're responsible for, you can give good advice as a trained sewer collections operator or somebody that's very knowledgeable in the industry. And it's just advice. And I know sometimes legalities get into it, and your agency may not want you to give too much advice or talk too much, but still be courteous in that, and knowing, hey, what can I do to help? And be nice about, hey, this isn't really our responsibility. You're gonna have to contact a plumber or handyman or something like that.
So Daniel, there was one question about the bucket the bucket operation that we talked about before. Do you typically does the operators on site typically do it, or do you hire a contractor to do that thing?
Depending on the agency, like I knew LADWP, they had their own operators that would do that, right? Mm-hmm. Now there are certain agencies that would contract that out, and that goes for a lot of things, depending on your agency size. I was just recently in a consultation meeting with a city in Northern California that's a little bit smaller, and they have 20 lift stations, but only 20 something miles of pipeline, as odd as it sounds, right? Even sewer line cleaning operations, depending on the agency, can be contracted out. Definitely CCTV inspections, right? So it really depends on the agency. All of this work, right? It's a matter of either exposure or monitoring or budgeting, right? So a little bit of both, right? So sometimes contracted out, sometimes agencies do have their own bucket machines and they'll do the work themselves.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, that was a good question. I also wanted to give you guys some more tools for your toolbox, right? There's a lot of monitoring technology out there, especially manhole monitoring equipment, kind of newer technology, kind of creates, gives you your own little SCADA system within a different manhole structure. And here I give you guys a couple of different examples of manhole monitoring equipment. There's different brands and distributors out there for sure. So I think I tried to include as many as I knew, right? Some of these include flow sensors, float alarms, and flow meters, right? These type of tools help you monitor potential problem areas, right? Inflow and infiltration areas. It helps you monitor other potential backups, right? So the great thing about these manhole monitoring equipment is you can move it from area to area, right? You may have to just recoat or refinish a manhole structure or a manhole lid. If you guys have those great composite lids, you can do something like you see in the bottom right-hand corner there, right? And just kind of install it on the manhole lid. That's an example there, but it's not a real manhole lid. But top left corner definitely shows you how some of our manhole monitoring equipment was installed. Great tools, move around the system, give you information on particular areas of interest, really minimal repairs when you're done. Just another thing that you may have to just look at routinely. Good, great tools to have in your system. So for those of you that aren't aware of them, like I said, you can look them up. There's definitely a lot of brands out there that'll help you kind of help monitor outside of your just lift stations and your CCTV inspections and your routine cleaning and what you're seeing out in the field. These are great tools that help you keep eyes on your system when you're not there. So now it may be pretty routine for you guys to be included in different outreach programs, right? I think we had a couple questions yesterday, and definitely talking about how to deal with, or we had one question yesterday talking about how you deal with just problem areas and problem users or folks that are just kind of maybe not doing the right things when it comes to your collection system, right? So sometimes, and I remember we'd have the outreach teams or the public relations teams kind of go out to our operations team and have us kind of want to take part in these outreach programs, and it wasn't always something that everybody was super happy to be a part of, right? But it definitely matters as far as exposure to your system, and you may not be able to reach everybody out in your collection system, but it definitely matters to just do your best to kind of just participate and help, right? Maybe your public relations team doesn't know what you know as far as the issues with grease or the issues with traffic in a certain zone, or so contributing to these outreach programs could be part of your routine operations, or maybe even reaching out to these if your agency has a public outreach or community affairs department, maybe reaching out and things and expressing some of the things that you want the public to know about, right? Or I think when I started our agency, that the public relations team didn't really exist, right? As it kind of developed, it was nice that when those folks got hired on, they got a lot of operator input of like, all right, what's the need here? What do we really need the community to know, right? They have their social media outreach teams, the folks that are making these type of videos, and the folks that are out there just kind of pushing out little pamphlets and letting folks know, hey, this is what we do, and this is what you can do to help us. This is what you can do to help us help you, right? So community outreach is beneficial. It helps you reduce the fog, or also known as fat oils or greases, and it gives you a little extra awareness and appreciation, because like I said, I'm well aware that your collection system operators are sometimes overlooked and underappreciated, right? So being involved in these things definitely helps. Another thing that you may want to be involved in, and this is a cool video Glendale, Arizona put together, right? It was just these recruitment opportunities, right? If you can be involved in recruitment and just letting people know what you do and how to get great personnel out there, I'd say take the opportunity to do so. I think this is absolutely great, right? You want a great team, and you want to be able to work with people that are dedicated to your craft, just like you are. So any opportunity that you have to be involved in the recruitment process, something as simple as making a video and letting people know what you do and why you should want to work for your agency, makes a huge difference. So this is something maybe not so routine, right? But you guys should get comfortable with being involved with these parts of the process, right? We're getting into, and I believe the next two sections are system rehab and management principles. I know we've been going on for quite some time, so we'll take a 5-minute break if that works, and then we'll continue on from there.
Sounds good. So 9:25.
9:25. Yep. All right, if you guys are ready, we'll get started again. Making sure everybody's here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So system rehab, another fancy way of saying system repairs or making repairs, right? Important parts of your rehabilitation programs or system rehab programs are just using the data, right? It's important to use operator input, right? So when you're determining what areas of your system you want to focus your rehab efforts in, right? Make sure that we're talking to operators, and operator input's important. The guys that are out there cleaning and inspecting are the most familiar with the problem areas and can help you prioritize. Like, hey man, we're spending so much time in this section. If we repaired this, I mean, we can go move on to different areas, right? You have to use that information of recent or frequent problem areas, right? Use the flow meter trending, right? This can help you determine, of course, your inflow and infiltration, right? Other monitoring data like those manhole monitoring softwares that we are pieces of equipment that we talked about. And operators, I just wanted to encourage you that realize that the work you do matters, right? Communicate, even if it feels like folks aren't listening, right? Some folks, it matters. You continue to communicate. Eventually, it's going to catch ground, and you'll be able to make an impact in your system, and alleviate some of the stressful areas that you have to deal with. When it comes to rehab programs, right? A lot of the rehab work, and this again is another example of rehab work. Sometimes, depending on the agency, is either done by the agency by the agency themselves or subcontracted out, right? Some agencies don't have the construction teams to go out there and do a lot of the rehabilitation of their system themselves. And some may do. Like we were pretty comfortable doing some sewer line repairs in certain areas, but we definitely wouldn't do a lift station rehab, right? That required a little bit more engineering, a little bit more work. So it really depends on your agency and what resources you have available, right? But you guys still want to be aware of the components in these rehabilitation programs, right? Now, if you're doing either manhole or line repairs, right, you may have to set up a sewer bypass or especially monitor if a subcontractor is doing this, setting up a sewer bypass, right? And a sewer bypass is really just kind of, it involves just kind of bypassing certain areas to isolate that area for repair, right? So it usually involves plugging an upstream manhole, right? Plugging an upstream manhole to kind of back, or a downstream manhole on the upstream side. Sorry, got a little confused there. To just kind of let the water back up, right? Installing a pump, right? In this case scenario, in the illustration they gave you on screen, they had a submersible pump in there. And then the reason you guys, whether it's being subcontracted out or you're doing the work yourself, want to be really involved is because you have to bypass this via pumps above ground and past your work area, right? So you have a sewer that's being bypassed above ground in a designated area past your work area, so you can get the work done, right? One of the challenges in sewer is you can't just shut it off. It's not very easy, right? You can't tell customers to stop using their sewer systems. It doesn't work. Believe it or not, we've tried it in some industrial zones. It made almost zero impact to go door by door. So just be aware of it. This is one illustration. A lot of your sewer bypasses are going to look like this with big pumps above ground, and you're making sure everything's happening. You're watching for leaks, right? That's a huge potential for, in this case now, a sewer spill, right? It wouldn't be an overflow, but it would still be documented as an overflow, and it's still a violation of your permit if that sewage starts spilling out or leaking out of those hoses. So whether you're doing the work or not, you have to be aware of them, and you want to be able to monitor them, right? another major part outside of your line repairs or your manhole failures, right? There's different types of manhole failures, and see that I thought that was a cool picture because I've seen manhole lids actually, because of bad maintenance, actually drop into a sewer line and create a blockage or a backup itself. And the immediate danger of people falling in, or traffic or cars actually falling into an open structure, right? The types of failures include cracks or breaks, root penetration, H2S corrosion, right? Especially on those rungs and ladders inside the manhole structures. Things could, heavy traffic areas could definitely affect the performance of your manhole structure. Bad joints or mortar, other structural failures, broken grade rings. If you guys don't know what a grade ring is, I've included one in that bottom left, right? These concrete grade rings are kind of little tools that are used. That they make them I forgot what they are. It's kind of like a reinforced plastic now, or composite cover grade ring now. These things kind of just elevate your manhole structure from the barrel up to the actual manhole itself, manhole ring and cover. So these grade rings kind of elevate you to the right surface area. So that's what that is. So a lot of failures happen because of repaving. Sometimes you'll get pavers that are very common job for us to do is raise and recover manholes after they got paved, right? Because if they weren't coordinating with the city or agency, then they'd pave right over your manhole structure, get it completely covered up. You'd have to go out, locate it, jackhammer it out, raise it up, add a couple of grade rings, make sure everything's back in operational order, accessible, right? You want to make sure that all your manholes are accessible, right? Different types of manhole rehabilitation programs. A lot of these are going to be contracted out, but some of you guys may be doing these in-house, right? Chemical grouting, right? Which is just going into the manhole structure and applying grout to just kind of reseal that manhole structure. This will help you reduce inflow and infiltration. There's different coating systems, right? Especially in areas with, we've used this a lot in areas that are heavy with your H2S, right? You just coat the whole manhole structure. Really helps you with maintain the integrity and structure of that manhole, right? Of course, there's other methods, right? There's different liners that they sell. There's different concrete patching. You can go out there and just add a patch yourself, just kind of help extend the life of the manhole structure itself. In some cases, the manhole barrel and everything may be so damaged that you may have to do a manhole replacement, right? There's an open cut replacement, which is a full replacement of the manhole structure after it's severely damaged. Obviously, this is a bigger project, right? You may have to do a project like this if you, for whatever reason, need to relocate a manhole location. Things change in the city, and sometimes that happens. You have to relocate or place a manhole 100 feet down the street because this area is no longer going to be accessible to you. We've had road replacement programs that move the road completely that we have to do this for. So and for those of you guys that aren't aware of what a manhole barrel typically looks like, I wanted to add that one there. So another quick question, what is the best method for determining if H2S is present in the manhole? A, an odor in the manhole, B, the flow in the manhole, C, a gas detector, or D, use the new guy?
Answers are rolling in, and C seems to be the all-out favorite in this.
Absolutely.
Pigeons. So, I like that answer. Someone gave him pigeons. That's a good one. I think
yeah, pigeons. Use the canary, right? Or yeah, exactly. That's pretty old school, right? That's the original gas detector was the canary, right? But it was still gas.
Canary the coal man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. Right. Thank you for the humor there, Paul.
Yeah. And let's talk about a little sewer pipe rehab programs. There's different ways of rehabbing a sewer pipe. It's not always just dig and replace, right? You have a cured in place CIPP lining or cured in place pipe lining. This doesn't work to replace sags in the pipe. you definitely need to clean appropriately before you do this, right? But the liners consist of a tubular material with an epoxy resin that cures into a rigid liner. So you can see a demonstration of what that looks like at the bottom there. You clean out the pipe. There's broken pieces, right? There's some sedimentation there. If you clean everything out appropriately, there's great companies out there that'll help you do this. We've had this subcontract. I've never done it myself, so I've always kind of just seen the magic happen. But they add the liner out there. They kind of it extends everything out. Just hardens into a cool liner. You lose a little pipe capacity, but you extend the life of your sewer pipe for sure. There's also slip lining, very similar, right? Also, you see a cool picture of the slip lining happening at the bottom of the screen there. You end up with a much smaller diameter pipe inside the damaged section, right? And it can only be used when the smaller pipe is acceptable, right? Lower flows, but it really is just a matter of just throwing in another liner or another section of pipe inside your existing pipe, just kind of help you make a repair there. And of course, your more traditional methods, right? You dig, cut, replace, couple. This kind of more what I was used to getting involved in, right? Just repair couplings. They allow you to match different pipe types too, so it's kind of a nice feature. And of course, after you make these repairs, right, you're going to want to test out your repair, right? One of the most common and quick ways of testing out your repairs is just by mandrel sewer testing, right? And the mandrel is basically just pulled from manhole to manhole, right? The mandrel is set to the pipe size that you've just installed, or just slightly smaller than the pipe size, right? So it'll help you check for any imperfections. So usually, if you're an 8-inch pipe, right, you may use a mandrel that's designed for 8-inch, but it's usually really 7.5 inches. And some of the cool designs, like this one that you see up top, it's a little bit collapsible, right? So if it starts getting stuck, you'll feel the snugness, but you'll still be able to pull it out. Not every mandrel is like that. I mean, and some folks don't like that. Some people prefer a more rigid design to just really test out your sewer line and make sure, hey, look, if this 8-inch manhole or mandrel does not fit through this segment of line, then we're not right. So, of course, there is air testing. You plug a section up, you fill it up to a whatever your spec says is your appropriate air pressure. You fill that area up, and any pressure drop, you start measuring pressure drops. If any pressure drop in that area, and usually different agencies, or at least in California, different agencies have different standards, right? And some of you guys may know a little bit more about the Arizona standards, if there's more of a universal standard in Arizona. But you're right. Ideally, you measure it up to a desired pressure. You measure a pressure drop. Obviously, you have to be careful. You don't want to overpressurize that system and create a break yourself. But you measure a pressure drop over an extended period of time, usually about a day or so. If you drop more than the predetermined acceptable pressure drop, right, 2 pounds of pressure, then there's a leak, or a major leak present, and you have to do something about it. And then there's, this is vacuum testing. Air testing is the same. I included this video just for those of you guys that haven't seen what it looks like. Vacuum testing is the same as air testing, right? You'll throw some plugs in. It's only a 2-minute long video, so we'll let most of it play out. You have some pressure gauges there. That's what you're going to be monitoring once you drop your plugs. That's what they did. They dropped a plug in there. I'm sorry, I won't go too far here. Right, plugged up both sides. Tie off your gauges so you can make sure you see them. Right. You fill that line up to make sure that you have the appropriate air pressure in there. And then you're gonna just measure the pressure or see if there's any pressure drops after X amount of time. So I definitely encourage you guys to look up, and I apologize, I should have looked up some Arizona agencies or Arizona overall standards, but in my experience, these standards tend to be different agency per agency. What's acceptable for agency makes a huge difference. But overall, for testing purposes, it's a matter of an awareness of this is how this is done. So the remaining 20 or so minutes of this training is all going to be management principles, and really I took the approach of just taking some questions and doing my best to answer them. You'll see some example test questions along the way as well. So so for management, you want to keep asking yourself, how well does your system manage, right? So here's a couple of questions that you can ask yourself, right? Is your collection system budget separate from other accounts, right? Some agencies have operations budget that include other utilities, departments, etc., right? So making sure that your budgeting is separate helps you determine the true cost of operation, right? So you're going to want to break out your own budget, and your good management team is going to look at these management principles and say, hey, what are we using our budget for, right? So whether you're using it for repairs, salaries, supplies, hopefully, because I'm speaking up for my operators, most of it is going to salaries and benefits, right? And getting the proper equipment to get this stuff done, because we're going to just manage everything appropriately. And if is your funding adequate, right? That goes into the next question, right? So do you have enough money considered, factored into your costs in the future, right? You want to consider operational costs, future capital improvements. Is this improvement on a 1 year or multi-year plan, right? Let's be honest, sometimes depending on your budget, and unfortunately I've had to deal with budget so many times. A lot of what I did in the last public agency I worked for was dealing with the board and having to make these presentations to say, hey, this is why we need a little bit more, right? And sometimes it wasn't something that, hey, we're not going to be able to get the budget to replace this lift station next year, but within the next 3 years, this is how we can approach saving enough money and making sure that you have the proper funding to make this replacement or make this project happen, right? It's a big factor in your management team. Always consider what adjustments you need to make to your next budget cycle, right? Some of you guys are operating off of yearly, bi-yearly budgets, right? These are sometimes a little difficult to kind of project out. I mean, I remember when I first became a manager, right? I was always just told, like, look, take last year's budget, add 10% and you're good. And then you realize that things can get a little bit more dynamic than that. And sometimes there has to be a lot of thought process that goes into your budgeting. So I realized that, once I got to my collections 4 certification, most of my questions were all management related. And a lot of these things were things that I hadn't really considered, even though I was a younger supervisor at the time. I hadn't really considered how important these discussions were. So I was happy I used to joke that whatever I answered, I was fortunate enough to pass all my exams on the first try, and whatever I answered, I used to joke with the operators, like, look, I passed that exam, whatever my current management team was doing, I said the opposite answer, and got me a certification right now. Then I became a manager, and then I was like, all right, cool, maybe I need to take a better approach to this, right? So
there was a question that was put forward about asking, have you seen sinking funds used? These are funds set aside to address future needs, I guess is what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I've seen very similar setups. So absolutely I have seen. I mean, there's different approaches, and I've seen folks that have bonds that they may have to sell or deal with. Different agencies have different approaches and different resources available. Definitely, there's depending on the project, right? You can also use there's a lot of federal funding that may be available to help you, right?
Mhm.
It's important to have a great team out there that helps you locate these things too. I'm not gonna. I worked with an amazing team that they hired on an amazing team. Once I realized there's so many more resources that I'm gonna say my little brain wasn't aware of right at the time. I was so focused on the operation and what we needed to operate that it took quite a bit of exposure. I mean, we ended up having somebody on our team that used to work for was part of a presidential candidate's campaign, right? They were really tied into the political side of things, and it actually made things great because then you were more aware of a lot of these funding efforts that are out there for your agency to use. So there's definitely things that you can tap into. So
Overall, we've got what you call it, a bunch of answers to this question. In addition to this, so we got primarily D's for the answers with a 1 C so far.
primarily what? I'm sorry.
D's.
D's, yeah. So yeah, I'm sorry, I need to get back into.
Sorry.
And obviously, so the best way for a manager to transmit information is definitely by face-to-face meetings, right? You want to have that face-to-face. It's really hard, and I've had managers in the past that are non-present, and I had some that are extremely present. Now, I will tell you that I still work for the best boss that I've ever worked for now, or I still work. He was my employer, or he was my boss at a public agency, and then we signed on with Corollo, and we had that great relationship, right? Because he was always great at just having that face-to-face time, making sure that, look, this is what we need to do to push forward. This is what we need to do to make our department better, right? And I was fortunate enough to have that relationship that, when we signed on to this engineering firm, right? I mean, I'm an operator working for an engineering firm right now, and I always think that's a blessing, right? And this was all a matter of these face-to-face meetings, and sometimes even employees aren't comfortable. I've also had that experience where some employees think it's you never want to talk to management face-to-face, right? It's important. It helps you, one, get your recognition, and helps a manager really develop that personal relationship, and it really sets forth a better operating team. So and I thought that was a cool picture too, because nowadays in this world, face-to-face meetings, I realized a lot of my face-to-face meetings ended up being Teams calls because of COVID showed us a lot of that. It's not always face-to-face, but you have a lot of tools that make this available, make these types of meetings a little bit more accessible, right? Another thing to think about in your management is how much input does your operations and maintenance personnel have, right? These guys that are out there are the guys that know the system best. Even if you're a guy like me that came up out of the operations group and made it into became a manager, right? I have this tendency to believe that nobody knew the system as well as I did, because I worked the system the longest, or I troubleshoot, and I was the guy that helped change this out. And you come to realize that things are dynamic and things change, and nobody really. The truth of the matter is, the guys that are working the system now are the guys that know it the best, right? You may know some particular details or a little bit of history, but these guys that are out in the field really know the system best, right? Hands-on personnel, right? And they should always have an input on your operations and maintenance, outlook and your approach, right? Or where your efforts are going to be, where your efforts should be concentrated, right? So I mean, it's not every decision, of course, or it's not the final decision, but they should have a major part of making that decision, or a major input into making that decision. So another thing that you should think about in management is your review of your actual costs versus your budgeted costs, right? This is going to help you determine the strategies for future budgets and amendments, right? Look, you have to know where you're at. One of the things that I got really good at, after my first 2 years of management, after getting really in those serious talking tos by upper management, right, or the general manager of like, hey man, you have to stay within a certain budget, right? So get really good at just seeing where we were, seeing where we were going to be, keeping track of that, day by day, week by week. Just try to be try to do the best we can to really use, and in my case, I work for a public agency, so public funds appropriately, right? Does your customer billing reflect the true cost of the wastewater collections and conveyance? Right. Now, this is always a hot topic, especially nowadays, because it seems like rate increases, they happen everywhere, right? We definitely went through at least 3 or 4 while I was at my agency. Like I said, I worked for the agency that I worked for before Corolla for, I think, 16 years. And we definitely had a number of rate increases there, right? It's management team's responsibilities to ensure that property budgeting for the operations team. Well, it's your responsibility to ensure proper budgeting while maintaining consciousness of what consumers are paying for, and if what's needed is more than what currently is coming in, then that needs to be a real conversation with the public, and it's not always an easy thing to do, right? But fortunately, a lot of teams, a lot of agencies have teams that look into this in depth, right? And help you through this whole situation. But it is an important part of your management team or management system, right? To know. Another quick question. You're preparing to implement a staffing plan. Which of the following is most critical to a successful implementation? A, lawyer review. B, selecting shift personnel. C, advanced communication of the plan to the staff. Or D, approval to the board. Approval by the board.
Answers are rolling in right now. And looks like we got a near consensus at, I'll wait for one more to come in just because. Looks like C is the winner.
Absolutely, right. Especially if your staffing plan is changing, you're going to want to talk to the folks that it's going to affect the most, right? So you want to talk to them. So unfortunately, I also have first experience. This was with my treatment staff, with having to change their schedules, and I can tell you, and this was something that was kind of pushed upon me even from higher management. I had folks that weren't happy with me, and actually the communication with them and their input and making them feel like they were involved in every step of the process made it easier, although it wasn't happy, right? We had a treatment staff that wasn't used to the 24/7 operations that most treatment teams are work, right? So telling people, hey, you're working weekends and nights is not always the easiest thing, but giving them input in how we're going to make that happen, or communicating with them well in advance to making that change definitely alleviated some of the pains. So so who does the staffing plan directly impact, right? The staff. Make sure they're involved. Couple more management slides, guys. So I know we're running on time, but I don't want to rush too much. Is the flow metering being used at optimal locations, right? Flow metering helps determine areas of infiltration and inflow, and inflow and infiltration directly impacts cost, right? Flow meters are set throughout your system, right? Are those, as a manager, you have to assess, is this data coming from the right place, right? Is their operations and maintenance program preventing or reducing SSOs, right? We talked about the frequency of SSOs is a great indicator of your overall performance, right? Management shall analyze and instruct accordingly, right? So you should know whether SSOs are how big an impact SSOs are, right? Your goal is really 0 SSOs, but look, if you have 10 SSOs last year, right? You want to make realistic goal, getting your maintenance operations and maintenance program or rehab programs in order to, you may only have 7 next year, right? Your goal should be 0, right? And you should always work towards that. So, and if you're at zero, if you're one of those agencies that has not experienced an SSO recently, great job. What are you doing right? And make sure that you're keeping that in mind. Like, hey, we don't want to experience a SSO, right? So what are the things that we're doing right? What things that we want to make sure we're upholding to stay at the standard? And we talked a little bit about this, or operational maintenance decisions based on current data, right? You need to discuss the data and update the approach frequently, right? Is there any increased flows in new areas? How much is rain affecting you, right? What type of new construction, is how is that going to affect you, right? Anything that's building, we had, like I said, I worked at an agency that almost doubled in size in my time there, right? So, and I know there's a lot of places in Arizona. Arizona is one of those states that's ever growing, right? You got folks like me that keep moving over there. California, it's moving to Arizona, Texas, wherever else. I am in California that's moving to Texas now. So you guys get an influx of folks like me, right? So what type of impact is this new construction, new communities going to have on your system? You're keeping that data in mind. Rain effects, right? Don't know how much rain happens in certain areas. I know northern Arizona may get a lot of rain, but that makes a huge difference. I worked in California during the time of a major drought. Just recently, California had 2 really wet seasons, which is uncharted territory for a long time, right? Yeah, definitely a lot of deficiencies were exposed. So all those things to keep in mind. Are provisions being made for continued training of personnel? Right, we talked about training and management engagement, right? You want to make sure your staff is properly trained, right? They're staying up to date with your safety training, newer equipment, newer techniques. Doing refreshers, kind of like this training, right, matters. Whether this training is a good one or a boring one, right? Making sure that you're getting that refreshed information, right? Making sure that you're getting that exposure to the new equipment, new techniques, right? Management teams should consider how to get these trainings, right? One of the best things that I used to like to take advantage of, and just throwing it out there just in case you guys aren't thinking about it. When you do get equipment, it's important to use your sales folks, right? And tap into their training resources, right? Look, it benefits the sales folks, it benefits your team to get that exposure, right? Tap into those relationships. There's a lot of folks out there that are willing to do a training, right? A lot of trainings that some of you guys know end up being huge advertisements for a particular product, but it still gives you exposure, and it still gives you, it gives you contact hours for those of you guys that need contact hours, but it still gives you, just a perception of what's out there and what you need to do. Another big conversation is, how is your job turnover? We talked about the importance of a collection system, operators and a good team, an experienced team. You want to keep a good experienced team, right? So if you're dealing with a lot of these guys, right, and the angry work staff or personnel, right, it's usually because maybe you're not doing your job appropriately. A little bossy, being a bossy boss, or being a boss that's not really understanding could hurt, right? Also, maybe somebody's feeling overwhelmed or overworked. You need to take these things into consideration. Low turnover is a goal to establish a stronger operations team, right? You want to make sure your morale's good. You want to make sure your workload is good. What type of things can you do as a manager to help this out, right? And sometimes it's not always about pay. I'll be honest, right? I've definitely taken positions and jobs for a little bit less pay that just had a way higher morale, and work-life balance. Your workload was overall a little bit better, right? So you have to consider these things for your team as a manager. Energy consumption, right? How efficient is your system, right? Are things like fuel and electricity taking up substantial costs? Is there a pump at a lift station that, hey, old reliable may be great, but sometimes it's costing you a lot more to run that pump, right? Is it time to start thinking about what pumps do we need to replace? in what sections, right? And overall, some of these replacements, if you get something a little bit more efficient, may actually be beneficial, right? So keep those things in mind. Determining the right ratio between your corrective reactive, or preventative and proactive maintenance, right? I saw this illustration, and I thought that was a great way of defining whether you're being corrective or preventative, right? Corrective actions, the actions are happening after the problem, right? Preventative actions are happening before the problem. Now, it's inevitable to sometimes have to correct an action after a problem, right? But you really know when you don't have to deal with these corrective actions as often, right? And you're dealing with more preventative maintenance. It's a great sign of letting you know how well you're managing your collection system. Maintenance records, right? You want to make sure that you maintain these records, right? Are they accessible? Are they available for reviewing? Who's analyzing? How often you're analyzing, right? I mean,
Hey Daniel, you still got to keep on talking, but I just wanted to say, if people are logging off, just make certain that you download the handouts where you can get document your CEUs. So if you go to the panel that's on the side there, there's a tab called handouts, and you can click on that. There's a PDF you can click and download where you can document that. So just want to make certain, if people are jumping off, that they get that before they leave today. Absolutely. Keep on going now. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
And we're almost done, guys. So we got about 9 slides left, and these will go kind of quickly. So, how often are we analyzing our maintenance records? These things like your line cleaning data sheets, or your CCTV inspections, all those things matter. How often you're having to do maintenance on a certain pump, they matter as far as decision making on overall management of your system, whether a pump needs to get replaced, rehab, rebuilt. Another quick question: which of the following types are planned collection system maintenance? A, predictive and preventative; C, emergency and corrective; or B, emergency and corrective; C, scheduled and emergency; or D, redundant and deferred.
Got a couple of responses rolling in now. Looks like A is the winner at this point.
All right.
The consensus.
Yep, A is definitely the winner on that one. All right. Another thing to consider in management is, do you have enough adequate spare parts, right? Spare parts must be reviewed. You have to, you want to think about what you want on your shelf, right? You want to avoid delays in equipment, long repairs. You want to avoid the delays in equipment being available. You want to avoid long repair times, right? You want to consider things like mechanical seals, the packing, the valves, camera heads for your CCTV equipment. Are these things available for you, or if they're not, right, how quickly can you get them? And are you going to be down? Can your agency afford to be down for that long? Definitely want to consider how old your equipment is, right? Sometimes that old reliable pump may not be as efficient, may not be performing as well, right? Think about the possible downtime if these pumps or any piece of your equipment goes down. How reliable this equipment continues to be for you, right? Are appropriate resources and tools available for repairing, maintaining, and installing equipment, right? Specific tools for specific areas. Are you do you have them, right? You may require them. I remember when, as a young operator or a young collections operator, so one of my maintenance guys yelled at me and was like, "Where's the boat stretcher?" Right? Obviously, he was talking about a torch, right, to cut off the bolts and nuts, right? And sometimes you need the appropriate tools to get the job done. So keep that in mind. How's your lift station performance, right? Overall efficiency and performance. You want to compare it to the original design, or when it was brand new. How great are you still performing? Those are things to keep in mind. How many standby units do you have? How ready are you for that that disaster or catastrophe, right? Consider the loss during breakdowns, right? Make sure you have redundant pumps. Make sure you have redundant combination units. I mean, there's some emergencies that you can't really prepare for. I know there's SSOs that I worked in where we had to call every agency in our surrounding area to help us clean up the mess. But combination units and cleaning crews running around the clock. You want to consider whether you have those relationships already built, and how ready are you for the worst case scenario? Are you meeting the demand, right? Very important. And I believe this is the last slide, if not one of the last slides. Look, it's important to analyze, are you meeting the intent of your collections department, right? The intent of your system, right? Are you able to deal with the peaks and valleys, right? I added the Super Bowl thing, right? Because famous day for a lot of collections departments, if you have one of those cities that gets to be a host city for major events like the Super Bowl, or even if you're not the host city, right? Or usually these events make a difference, right? A lot of Super Bowl parties going on. Are you ready for these worst case scenario? Look at the historical data, and are you performing well during this time? So remember that you have to meet a demand, right? So make sure your system is ready for it. I think this is the last one. And of course, make sure that you have an emergency response plan, right? Make sure that you're ready. You have a plan for all of these potential emergencies, whether emergency storages or emergency responses. If lift station goes down, right? We used to have big containment ponds in certain lift stations, right? Do you have that available to you? How much detention time do you have in your sewer system itself? Those are things and calculations that you want to keep in mind, right? Also, an emergency response plan for chemical responses, right? So all these things matter. With that comes to the end of today's presentation. Of course, like we mentioned earlier, this is the QR code for any feedback. Like I said, all feedback is good feedback, whether it's good or bad. Definitely would love to hear it, what we can do to improve. So I will not get my feelings hurt. I definitely am the type of guy that wants to get better. So this format is a little bit different, but there is no excuses. We could always make things better. So I appreciate any feedback, and I'm sure ADEQ does too. So with that, thank you guys for joining. That concludes this presentation.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Tina.
Okay, yeah, just thank you for coming. I think we'll leave this slide up for maybe 1 more minute so everyone can leave feedback. Go ahead, Jason.
So I was just going to say, so a couple other things to note is that the video recording of this will be available as well on YouTube at some point soon, and then I think the slides will also be available, right, Tina?
Yep, I sent it in the chat, the website where we host all our presentations and resources. So the slide deck should be available on there, and then that website also has a link to our YouTube channel. So these presentations from yesterday and today will both be up there. Give us a little bit of time to get that done, but they'll be up there.
Yes, agreed. And I also want to thank Daniel. I've seen a lot of thank you comments as well, but Daniel, great job on the presentation.
Thank you, guys.
All right. With that, I will end the webinar in about 10 seconds. So make sure you scan that QR code.
Thank you all, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. It was definitely my pleasure. Appreciate it.